Hi guys, Tugur here with a new video, and this video will be a meta-analysis video about Solo Shuffle, and I have something very special. In my mind, I think it is way more interesting if we analyze data from 3 weeks ago and we're talking right now. So we could actually say, look, something has changed on the ladder because I can talk about numbers about DH, I can talk about DKs, I can talk about resto druids, but they already reached a certain point of rating, so they're not going to lose that rating from 3 weeks ago, right? So what we can analyze is who is actually pushing now rating on the specs that were underperforming, or right now what spec are actually don't really gain any other numbers except just inflation numbers. So now I'm going to talk about it. I have my video from 3 weeks ago. This is from 3 weeks ago, right? And I know. This is from 3 weeks ago. And basically, you see, from 1800 US, this is US, 1800, you do see that there is 1136 disc priests, 711 resto druids, 522 mistweavers, 347 restoration shamans, 295 holy paladins, yada yada. You all can read it, right? Now we're going to talk about this 1800 US, and I find it very interesting. I'm going to do the same for 2100 plus, I think. But if I'm scrolling down, we have 1800 disc priests. So from a few weeks ago, we have now 700 extra disc priests on the ladder above 1800. We have a bit more, like 400 more resto druids. We have actually gained more than 600 holy paladins in US, again US, which is massive. It's a massive number that you actually gain for a spec that actually was underperforming 3 weeks ago, and they didn't really get like big buffs. If I'm not mistaken, they do get like a few mana regen buffs, and now they have a few other switches, but also meta switches. Some specs were nerfed, some specs were buffed. So I guess there is also an underlying factor with that. 300 extra mistweavers. We have around 400 extra restoration shamans, and then we have like some sad numbers. Only 100 extra holy priests, and about like 150 actually, like a bit more, like 170 actually, but 160 extra holy priests, and we have only 80 more preservation evokers. So this is actually showing that even though the inflation is now in place and people have time to now get like 1600 1800 rating, it is just not going to perform well on those specs. Again, those specs are not like really super popular right now, which I understand. But whenever something is like vastly underrepresented, but also under played and just not doing well, it is really showing on the numbers. So what does it show? It does show that Holy Paladin actually overtook a lot of places, a lot of rankings. Although it's again not really the most, I would say, OP spec in my eyes, but also just not the most represented spec out there. And they got like a 600 jump. So what happened in meantime? Is it a meta switch, or what did happen? So I'm going to analyze all of this. But let's talk about the ranged ones. We have 500 extra BM hunters. We have a bit more, like also a lot of demonology warlocks, a lot of destruction warlocks. Actually, destruction warlock did a big jump. We have 800, and it was 331 3 weeks ago. Elemental Shaman 400 extras. We have also Boomies 300 extras. Frost Mage also did a big jump, 300. Devastation Evoker also 300, and they had like only 158. So they got a bigger piece of the pie. We have Hunters also jumping a big number, again 450. And then we have like Shadow Priest also jumping. I think the 4-set helps tremendously. Shadow Priest, by the way, if you haven't seen the 4-set, Shadow Priest actually can play just around their 4-set burst and with Catharsis. And often you can just burst someone like 300k with just one lucky crit, for example. I already saw a crit of 200k from a Shadow Word Pain, which is quite telling. We have also a big, not really a big jump, but the Fire Mage didn't do too well. Affliction Warlock did some kind of a jump. And then Arcane Mage a bit of a jump, and augmentation evoker, like also discussed, is not really in a good position. If I was making a tier list today, it would be like D tier, like I did on my previous Soul Shuffle tier list. So that didn't change too much. Demon Hunters, they got like also a big popularity jump, but that's normal, I think, since it is a well represented spec right now. They gained 900 pretty much. DK is also gained a lot. Arms Warrior gained a lot. Retribution Paladin gained a lot. Windwalkers also a 500 jump, which is also very big for the amount of players that we had previously, like only 277 in US. And then Rogues, whoa, Subtlety Rogue did actually jump by a whole margin. Survival Hunter did somewhat okay. Fury Warrior actually gained a bit of a jump, like 140. Outlaw Rogue, like expected, not really the most represented spec out there. And then we have right now Frost Decay doing a bit better than previously, where I feel like Enhancement Shaman and Feral Druids are like the least represented specs out there melee wise. I think right now they are like doing pretty terrible. I think Enhancement Shaman can have some okay lobby where you can do some good like stuff. Same for Feral Druids. I think most lobbies are like losing lobbies where you are expected to lose rounds and you are trying to like steal a round or two to get like a lot of CR or to break even. And that's really the sentiment I have with melees. And ranged ones, I think nothing really changed, but you see that the stats are not lying. We had Enhancement Shaman actually at the 8th place, although they were all at small margins. But you see Feral Druids and Enhancement Shaman actually doing not that well right now. I think that is the general sentiment behind Feral Druids. Now I want to see the EU. And in EU, we have a lot of paladins as well. So it's not only like a US phenomenon, and US is very known with holy paladins being somewhat represented by like one tricks. But something that you cannot really not see, I would say, is that Enhancement Shaman is really the lowest represented spec out there with Frost Decay and Fury Warriors. Feral Druids a bit more, but we have some Warm Tricks that are playing multiple Feral Druids. But again, this is not really going to tell the whole story, right? I'm going to show you guys at 2100 what happens. If you go for the US 2100, we have 206 Holy Paladins. They are actually very much tied with Disc Priest, only 70 away, which is a massive jump. I don't know if I show the 2100 numbers. I'm going to see if I can show you guys. If I do show the 2100 number, let's see. This is not 2100. This is also EU, I think, if I believe. This is 2100. 2100 US. I see on the top right. This is 2100 US. Only 43 Holy Paladins. This is a massive jump in actual ranking that is, like, again, I think super useful to see. You also see a bit of a jump with Resto Shamans and mistweavers. And that's true, but you also see like Disc Priest and Resto Druids also getting a lot of like representation. But you have to remember the jump from Holy Paladins is way bigger, like percentile wise, than the Disc Priest one and the Resto Druids one. And this is just going to explain that right now it's probably easier to rank up because inflation is in place, but also that some specs get more represented also whenever you go higher and higher, and it seems like the effectiveness of that spec is not dwindling down just like a wimp. And I want to see for 2400 really quickly for the Holy Paladins, we have 26. This I haven't seen. I have seen the 2100. I decided to make a video about it, but 26 Holy Paladins above 2400 in the US, more than Disc Priest. So you understand how big the difference is compared to previous, like 3 weeks ago, the previous meta-analysis video. This is going to be like a realization for me also, because again, my tier lists are not only like based on like feeling and what I see on the field by playing Soul Shuffle, but I also play Holy Paladins right now. I do feel like, sometimes I feel like I'm doing better than not. And maybe it's because of the meta, because of maybe good lobbies, or just maybe because Holy Paladins feel like you could actually heal a lot, and you have buffs that can save a lot of like those matchups. You have some damage if you build through for the damage, I would say, but you could also play for the mana if you really want to, although it's very hard to do so with Social Fine Dampening. But you have ways to actually make games go in your favor, and it does feel like statistically it gives me right with what I'm seeing. So I think it's a good thing that we are doing this video, because I think a lot of people are like not realizing the potential of some specs. But like for example 2100, let's go back to 2100 in US. You see we have also a bit more melees, which is usually what is going to happen. A big jump of Unholy DK and Arms Warrior, but I think that's normal. Windwalker also got a big jump, like percentile wise, you have a lot more Windwalkers right now. And we also have a few like Feral Druids, Enhancement Shamans, Fury Warriors, and DKs. But 3 weeks ago, we only had one Fury Warrior. So you see now it's a bit more easier to progress. But the percentiles of, like, let's say Feral Druids is way like little compared to what had happened with the other specs, like for example Frost DKs, Fury Warriors, Enhancement Shamans. They gained way more people around 2100 and more than a Feral Druid. Only gained like 50%, like their 100% of their numbers, so 16 plus like minus the 33 minus 16, pretty much only like a few ones that are going to get above 2100 since 3 weeks ago, while we have like 23 extra Fury Warriors. So you see that some specs are doing better than previously, although not really fantastic as well. It's not like Fury Warrior are jumping like 200 places, for example. But you still see that like the comparison. BM Hunter are like overtaking in the US now. You have way more BM Hunters, and that's just showing how strong the Forset is also, but also just how strong BM Hunter is currently. We have Destruction Warlock overtaking Demonology Warlock, which is something that is going to happen regardless, I think. Elemental Shaman as well, like they're going to jump places as well. So you have a few specs that are like surprising to me, but I think the biggest surprise is Holy Paladin, and I think it kind of shows also how strong in the meta is right now. If you're talking about the EU, I think EU will be a bit different. In EU, we have still a lot of Holy Paladins actually. They are very close to Disc Priest. And then we have like more Destruction Warlock and Demonology Warlock, but I think in the EU we are generally having a lot of Warlocks. It just is, we are playing very meta-centric in EU. If we see that the meta is Warlock, we're generally going to jump on a Warlock, for example. That just is how it is. But you see Fury Warrior is still underperforming. What I can see is also we have less numbers in EU. I think there's just less players that are actually active in PvP. At least from what I see right now, and we have a lot less unholy DKs compared to the US. But if I do 2400, for example, I want to see the numbers, and wow, actually Disc Priest only 14, and we have like Mistweavers and Holy Paladin is actually overtaking Disc Priest. So am I, like, again, I'm not making a tier list right now. I'm not in the mood to actually talk 1 hour right now about Soul Shuffle. I might make it maybe week in the weekend of the new year. We could do that, but I think right now Holy Paladin and Mistweavers are actually overtaking Disc Priest. So is it warranted now to put Disc Priest at S tier? Well, it kind of shows that the specs are catching up to Disc Priest. So you have way more Paladins right now, way more Mistweavers. And you have to remember, you have already a lot of Disc Priests that have attained 1800 or more before those 3 weeks, right? So you see that people are actually catching up at 2100, and whenever you're going to go higher, you see way more Holy Paladins compared to Disc Priest. And it's representation, right? If you see like you have 1800 Disc Priest at 1800, and then at 2100 you have 265, but the Holy Paladins are like, the percentiles are way closer to each other. And then 2400 you have a bigger piece of the pie for Paladins than Disc Priest. It kind of shows that statistically, like purely statistically, without like trying to talk about like how it is on the terrain, it does show that Holy Paladin has the better potential to get you to 2400 if you really so desire, for example. Is Holy Paladin simpler to play than Disc Priest? Maybe, maybe not. Is it because of Disc Priest having so much tendencies of going aggressive? I don't know. Thank you for subscribing, Mohammed Salam. So just in general, you have a lot of ways to see the numbers. You see also a lot less Retribution Paladins, for example, and you see way more Windwalkers actually overtaking Arms Warrior, and that's also kind of showing how the strength of an Arms Warrior is compared to a Windwalker. Um, I can show you right now, like 35 Windwalker, 27 Arms Warrior. If I'm going on 2100, you see 256 Arms Warrior and 174 Windwalkers. So the percentiles are changing. Same for 1800, you see way more Arms Warrior compared to Windwalkers, but for some reason you see way more of the bigger piece of the pie of Windwalkers compared to our Arms Warrior. And the same for 2400, where Arms Warrior actually go below Windwalker. I think the reason behind that would be that Windwalker has way more carry potential, while Arms Warrior has way more utility, and utility is very good in 3s, for example, in 2s, but in Soul Shuffle, utility is not always the best thing ever because you're kind of dependent on, let's say, your teammates actually using that utility that you're giving to them. You also have less CC than a Windwalker. You have less potential to do a few things that a Windwalker could do, for example. And the same for Retribution, only 8, and that kind of shows that again, you kind of are lobby dependent, but also if you're playing with a Holy Paladin, your chances of winning are going drastically lower, for example, because of forbearance. So all those things combined kind of shows me that the meta has switched. And again, I think the Soul Shuffle tier list that I made a few, previous week is kind of not really irrelevant, but I would say there is a lot of things that can be taught and learned from that video that I'm making right now. Also for myself, I think it kind of shows that sometimes the terrain is not always the sole truth. And although I feel like Holy Paladins, they have some bad matchups. If you play like a full caster lobby, it does feel like Holy Paladin is like having to overheal a lot of the damage that you have to actually perform compared to having a bob for Arms Warrior or for Windwalker. But I think in general, you have some ways to see that it goes well for a Holy Paladin. Let's say a Windwalker is good, but if you're facing a Holy Paladin, it becomes a bit less good because again, a Bobs kind of annihilates Serenity, for example. So you have a lot of ways to see that, and I think it's a good thing that we're doing this video. I think it's a good thing that we are analyzing it. I think a lot of people are like kind of sleeping on a few things. For example, I think Arms Warrior is like nowhere near meta in Soul Shuffle. I think Windwalker is very meta in Soul Shuffle right now. I think Retribution Paladin, although people say that it's okay, I think it's meh. I think it's just kind of there and it can perform, but I don't think you can carry as much as some specs. I think rogues are like underlying specs that can actually do very well, but it depends on the user and your teammates, not really ruining your goals, for example. And then you have feral druids actually just stagnating at their rank, and they're never really growing. And it's not like they're like unpopular. I think just in general, feral druid is very niche, but I don't think like a niche spec, because I think Windwalker is also very niche. I think a niche spec not being that good, it just stagnates very hard, while a niche spec that is very strong, they perform very well. So those are my takes. Let me know what you think about this video. Maybe you learned something. Again, I didn't talk like about every single spec. I didn't talk about every single occasion or about every single thing, but I think it's not always needed. And I think with just the visual things, and you see the difference between 1800, 2100, 2400, but also just in general with the previous video I've made 3 weeks ago. If you want to check that out, you can always check that out. You see that the differences of the specs actually growing, and if you're like going on 2400, you see that Holy Paladin actually is one of the bigger pieces of the pie, and I feel like it's a strong thing going forward if we want to analyze like the tier lists, but also analyze the aspect of, look, a spec can also just stop playing if they are underperforming. They're still going to show on the ladder, but what is changing with the weeks? How many new arms warriors? How many new holy paladins? I think that's a few things that actually need to be seen, and that people are like only looking at the numbers like, oh, we have 460 DHs, but they don't remember that DHs previous weeks had 308, but you have other classes actually jumping 300 extra characters, for example, in that bracket and in that rank. So again, you have to see the broader picture so you can actually give your opinion and to actually have like not scientific opinion, but like more of a precise opinion and a bit more of a vision behind a tier list, a vision behind a analysis video, for example. So hopefully you did learn something. I know it's like a bit of a boring kind of thing. I like numbers. Not everyone likes numbers. I like analyses. I understand that not everyone likes it, but I think it's very needed so you can actually understand. And I made a tier list yesterday. If you want to check that out, it is the best targets you can actually choose to target from the get-go in the solo shuffle. So if you want to check that out, you can always check that out on one of these videos. And if anything, you can always ask me in the comments and I will try to help you to the best of my capacities.